privilege to be sitting down with you, Jamie. There's a lot to get to in this conversation. So I figured we'd start small, and then I would ask you a really basic, straightforward question, and that is, what's your biggest worry right now?
Yeah. So first of all, thrilled to be here. I'm glad you're doing this. I hope we may join the defense forum you guys do every year too. And look, the way I look at it, the big picture is the tectonic plates are shifting. We got to get our heads wrapped around that. Those tectonic plates are the geopolitics with these terrible wars, terrible proxy terrorist activity around the world, North Korea, the potential proliferation of nuclear weapons over time, which is the greatest threat to mankind. And then you have the other tectonic shift is the global economy. So the global military umbrella of America, and then the global economy, of which trade is a part. You know, the other parts are do people want to partner with you? Do you have your alliances? Do you have investment agreements? And all those various things, and they're changing. And then our debt, which you just heard a bunch of folks talk about eloquently, it's large, and it's not just us. We added $10 trillion in 5 years. We have, you had Reagan up there talking about deficits. The debt to GDP was 35%, and the deficit was 3.5%. Today, it's 100% debt to GDP net, and a deficit of almost 7%, highest peacetime ever. And when the CBO does their numbers, which I don't really trust, by the way, they should do the stress test. Like, what happens if we go into a recession? That 7% will be 10%. And so we have problems, and we got to deal with them. And then the biggest one, underlying both that, is the enemy within. I'm not as worried about China. China is a potential adversary. They're doing a lot of things well. They have a lot of problems. What I really worry about is us. Can we get our own act together, our own values, our own capability, our own management? What you heard today on stage was the amount of mismanagement is extraordinary, by state, by city, for pensions, and that stuff is going to kill us. And I always get asked this question: are we going to be the reserve currency? And no, if we are not the preeminent military and the preeminent economy in 40 years, we will not be the reserve currency. That's a fact. Just read history. Now I think we will be. Warren Buffett here would tell you we're enormously resilient. I agree with that. I think this time is different. This time we have to get our act together, and we have to do it very quickly. That was a big answer. There's a lot to dig into there. So the takeaway is geopolitics. I have a great quote for the first thing too. Someone said the government spends like a drunken sailor. And someone else said, no, a drunken sailor spends his own money. I forgot who said that one.
So you're talking about a total realignment of the global order. We're talking about a restructuring and simultaneous reassertion of American hegemony in the middle of all this. Huge gamble afoot right now with some of the policies that are coming out and how they're taking shape. What does it take for it to pay off? Just a list of stuff. Okay, we have to acknowledge the grievances that have put us in this position to start with, and they're real. Okay, immigration, what the hell were we doing? The bottom 20% of our population, their wages didn't go up for 20 years. They're dying 7 years younger. When administrations, the Biden administration is giving all this money to EVs and cars and wasting a lot of money on green stuff, which isn't going to work, and all that. Do you think people in rural cities, do you think people in inner cities thought they were getting anything? Do you think that those people think that the American government is fair and competent and that this was in their best interest? Their schools don't work. They're not getting the skills they need, and you heard that just now. So we've got to acknowledge these. And I also call it blue tape because, Republicans, you generally don't like red tape. You understand the devastation of it. But, most Democrats, they love it. They want more of it. And they want to make it so confusing you can't even meet the rules, so you get punished and fined afterwards. And so, and then you have it in permitting, and I call the government the Leviathan that's too weak, can't get stuff done, and too strong. It imposes things on the American public that they're getting sick of, and they should be getting sick of it. And acknowledge that, celebrate our virtues: freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of enterprise, equal opportunity, family, God, country. And you can acknowledge the flaws that we have, which are extraordinary, what we did to the black population for years. Don't denigrate the great things of this country, because those are two different things. If you have in any team, if you put a team on the field and the team's torn apart, they're going to lose. And that's kind of us right now. We're not a team anymore, and we don't collaborate. We don't talk that much to each other. Deal with our policies, and this is the enemy within. We've got to fix our permitting, our regulations, our immigration, our taxation, which I think they're on their way. We have to fix our inner city schools, our healthcare system. If we fix those things, we can grow 3% a year, and all these problems will disappear. But the most important is maintain those military alliances, spend whatever you got to spend to have the strongest military in the world, and I think the goal, I'm hoping the goal of the Trump administration is this: keep the Western military alliances together. If the world cannot rely on America's military umbrella, we may have paid too much, we have not done it. If the world can't rely on it, they are going to be looking for alternatives. There's only one other real alternative out there, or getting a nuclear weapon. And then maintain and expand and grow our economic alliance. We have tons of treaties, economic treaties. We do a terrible job in development finance, but expand that. The goal, beating up Europe, the goal should be help Europe get stronger. We know what their problems are. Keep them closer. Do the trade agreements, the investment agreements. They'll keep the Western world together. Those two things will keep the world safe and free for democracy. If we don't do those things, the world is not safe and free for democracy. And so that's what we have to do. And people know what they are. We've all written about it. We just have failed to actually do it.